Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and we are back for another day of why these champs suck and how to fix them. Took a day off yesterday as I had quite a busy day on the schedule, so couldn't quite fit in a video, but I'm back today, which means we've got two more of these, counting today, so one more after this, and then we'll look at cards that need to be nerfed, and then we should get the patch notes, and then we can, sort of go from there and see what happens. But this is, another day, and we're starting with Taliyah, as you can see here in the landmark synergy. And yes, all three champions today are ones that I think most people would be like, on different levels, be on like, yeah, I wouldn't mind if they got some kind of buff in some way. But Taliyah, I think, is one that people would definitely put on like the top of their list. Taliyah needs a, huge sort of buff. As big as it can probably get. And so we're going to look at Taliyah and her archetype and see what kind of went wrong. And so Taliyah, let's start here, is a 5-mana 2/4, which of course is not a great stat line, but play, summon an exact copy of an allied landmark. Level up, you summon 5 landmarks, and the level up ability, obviously you get the 1/1 of stats, and deal 2 to my blocker if it's dead or gone, deal 2 to the enemy next instead. If you have a landmark, do this 2 more times. I think when we first looked at Taliyah, we thought, ooh, that's a really interesting design. I think most people didn't necessarily assume Taliyah was going to be really bad. And people thought, yeah, this could be quite strong if the right things came around. And I was very much on that train of thought, even after Taliyah had come out and couldn't really find a deck to work with. I was always of the opinion that, guys, just wait, there's still another landmark champion that's probably going to come out, and I'm sure that will, come out with a landmark that's like, oh, this is the landmark that you're meant to copy, and then Taliyah will make more sense, and then she'll be good, right? That didn't happen. That just, wasn't the case, and surprised me, and unless, there is plans to, sort of create future landmarks that are sort of like clearly copy this and it will be very powerful, but on its own it's like fine, but if you have 2 of them down it's really powerful, which would make Taliyah make sense. Unless that happens in the future, Taliyah can't be that good as she is right now. And that was always a shock to me. Did they not think when, what was their intention for this when, they wanted an exact copy of an allied landmark? I guess it would be a countdown landmark because it does say exact copy. So I guess that was the reason, that they included the word exact in there, and I'm guessing that that's what they wanted us to do, but then the countdown landmarks just weren't that strong, so a bit of an odd one in design choices. And, as I say, the landmarks that sort of came out, Ancient Preparations is, a good card on its own, but you don't really want to copy it. Preservarium is, again, another one that you don't really want to copy because you're only really going to get the draw 1. Grumpy... Actually, do you get the extra draw? I think you do, but it's not like amazing. Hibernating Rock Bear, this just isn't that great. Empress Dice, you don't really want that many landmarks, and you can follow this down, and pretty much all the landmarks in Hecarim are pretty much the same, where you don't really want to copy them, and that left Taliyah pretty bad. And landmarks obviously have the problem is they take up a board space that can't block or attack, and that can be, pretty bad, when you're facing against like an aggro deck that's going 6 wide on you and you can't deal with it. So that's another problem that Taliyah has, is that, landmarks are sort of in a weird place in this game. And then, Taliyah herself is just, the stats and the costs just aren't good enough. So I think that would be the obvious first change, right? You could make Taliyah 4 mana, and I think she'd be a lot better. Like, that is a big buff. Going from 5 to 4 mana is pretty significant. Like, don't understate that in any way. Even if Taliyah didn't have the best things to copy, that would still be, quite a big buff. And if you could ever find a landmark that you wanted to copy, for instance, in a Frozen Thrall deck or something like that, that would be very impactful, and Taliyah would be good, and that would probably allow that kind of Frozen Thrall deck to shine, to be honest, because you think about it, you've got like Lysandra on 3, Taliyah on 4, 5 into Draculon, like that could be, a pretty strong little 3 to 4 to 5 that you do there. So I think that would be a simple one to do, and a good change. I think one other change I would like to see for Taliyah, though, is in the Grumpy Rock Bears, the Hibernating Rock Bears. I feel like this is, where they wanted us to play Taliyah in. This is what they kind of wanted, and obviously we've seen more recently cards like Time in a Bottle that advance, landmarks 2 rounds or whatever. And so I think that this is a great card for a buff target. You know, the fact that it has a countdown 3, I'm kind of surprised that this is just a 5 mana 5/4 like on its own. This is kind of weird to me. And so personally, what I would do is I would slap Overwhelm on these Grumpy Rock Bears. I don't see why not. You know, it is this thing. You know, I would assume that this thing can overwhelm other things. You know, it seems like the kind of thing that would be able to. So I would slap Overwhelm on the Grumpy Rock Bears, and then all of a sudden maybe you have something going here. You know, maybe Taliyah like copying one of these with countdown 1, and you get 2, you know, 5/4 Overwhelms coming down on the board at the same turn. You know, that could potentially give you some stability. Maybe even make them 5/5. I would really go all in on this card. Because it's a very Taliyah card, but not necessarily works with too many other things. So I think that that would be, you know, a really good place to go. And it would also make like a card like Saltspire make sense, because granting your strong ally 2/2 if it's an Overwhelm card makes sense. You know, that's good because they're going to get Overwhelm damage, and it's probably going to live the next time you attack with it. So that to me makes sense. So that's what I do. I make Taliyah 1 less mana and give these Grumpy Rock Bears Overwhelm that they deserve. And I think then you might have a deck. You might really, you know, see Taliyah get played and see this whole Grumpy Rock Bear type synergy come about. And I think that that would be a very good change for the game. On to our next champion, and that is Hecarim. Hecarim, of course, you know, a long time ago now, a very long time ago, over a year ago now, once upon a time dominated the game. And I know that might sound as a shock to some of you, but it was true. Hecarim dominated the game, and Hecarim was perhaps, you know, one of the most overpowered champions we've seen in the game. Although I do think that was sort of a cause of, you know, having less cards that could deal with things as well. We'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah, Hecarim since those days has never really seen top tier play. You know, there was a brief flirtation with Grand Plaza, but I think that, you know, there was slightly better things to do than Ephemerals with Grand Plaza, like the Scouts deck. Was slightly better, but you know, that was nice to see Hecarim sort of, you know, briefly, and the Ephemerals make a brief sort of, you know, hurrah in you know, making a splash. But you know, obviously Grand Plaza was the key to that, because the card was just absolutely bonkers. But now not so much. So now things have retreated back, and we have a Hecarim that sees no play again. So how on earth can we fix Hecarim? Well, I think we need to look at some of the ephemeral cards first of all. And what's weird is actually some of sort of the ephemeral cards that you look at aren't that bad. You know, Blight Caretaker is still pretty good. Soul Shepherd, I think, is still, you know, I don't know how you would change this card without making it really, really, really good. You know, it's a 2 mana 2/3 that has, you know, the best ability you probably could have. Shark Chariot is another one that I think makes, you know, is good for the deck, and works quite well. Something like Evershade Stalker could maybe, you know, you could look at. And also these two cards, Haunted Relic and Onslaught of Shadows, I think are two cards that you could maybe look at trying to change these in some way, though I think Haunted Relic in particular would be pretty difficult to. But I think most of the problem actually can lie with Hecarim. And why Hecarim doesn't see play is because Ephemerals as a whole just don't have this sort of big finisher that they need, and that is Hecarim. And I think what needs to change is I would make it, I would go in on Hecarim as like, I want more ephemeral synergy. So making his level up harder whilst giving him a big buff seems to me like probably the best thing to do here. You know, make his level up condition really good for like an ephemeral deck, make it really, really strong. But make it slightly harder to level up, perhaps, so that he doesn't become this sort of generic, you know, play it in every deck, he'll be fine, because that's what used to happen. Hecarim sort of was just played on his own. Yeah. Hecarim to me has this big problem, which is ephemeral allies have 3 attack, summon 2 attacking spectral riders, which is fine, but of course most of your ephemerals and the ones that will be summoned, like the Shark Chariots or the ones that Hecarim summons himself, are to the right of Hecarim, and that means if Hecarim dies, they lose that attack, which is not great. So the first thing I would do is just change the wording of this so that the attack is given even if Hecarim dies. I think that that is so important and would really, really help quite a lot, because then it means if you've got a leveled up Hecarim and you attack with a leveled up Hecarim and you've got 2 Shark Chariots, say, for instance, that are going to be summoned as well, it doesn't matter if Hecarim dies, who is a threat himself, but now you're sort of being required to block all of the other ephemeral units as well, which obviously can be a big swing. And I think that that would be such a big deal for this whole archetype, and I really would like to see that. Outside of that, to be honest, I think you could go even further. I think that you can do one of two things. Either you can give Hecarim, like, change him back to his old 4-6 stat line, which, gave him more survivability and allowed him to attack multiple times reliably, which I wouldn't be against. You can either do that or make the Spectral Riders a 3-2 again. I think that, back in the day, that was a problem because there really wasn't, as many options or good units that you could play that could match Hecarim in any way. But I think we have entered the state of the game now, where there's so many options and things, happen so quick. Certainly right now, things are happening really, really quick to where I think people would be okay with dealing with Hecarim. And I think, people didn't really know how to play the game back then. And, people sort of stumbled across, something that was really good. But, maybe didn't stumble across other things that were really good that could counter it. I think of something like Ash Noxus, which pretty much stayed the exact same. No new cards came out for it, but it took like another 3 to 4 months for people to figure out, what that deck should look like and how it should be played. And so I think that all this makes sense. And I think that Hecarim, I would definitely like to see this wording changed, but I also think you can buff him in some other way. As I say, make him a 4-6, make the Spectral Riders 3-2. I'd probably err on the side of going for a 4-6 again. I think that would be fine. I think we have enough sort of, capable units that can counter Hecarim or strategies that could counter Hecarim that would make it okay. And so that's what I'd like to see for our big horse boy. And last but not least, we come to Jarvan, who, a lot of people thought was going to, come in big, with the whole burst speed attack, right? And we've seen that burst speed attack can be pretty good. Very good, in fact, in Azir Aurelia. But again, I always say that, people always read this part, but maybe don't look at this nearly as much as they should do. Which is always my problem with Jarvan. And I think that, yeah, that's still a problem for Jarvan as well. But, they gave Jarvan a big buff. Giving any card +1/+1 is a pretty sizable buff, particularly for a champion. And so the fact that Jarvan, I mean, see some play in Jarvan Shen, but I think that's more of a case, if Fiora didn't get nerfed, it wouldn't be Jarvan, it still wouldn't be a Jarvan deck. So still, I think Jarvan just isn't quite there, and I think that's because his level up version just isn't good enough. In a way, it doesn't, for a 6-mana champion, you really want to be like, I've leveled up my 6-mana champion. Let's get winning this game. Let's give a clear indication of how I'm going to win this game. And Jarvan kind of doesn't. Jarvan's like, yeah, you can win like really, you'll win in like 5 turns. If your opponent is, just playing units, you'll win in 5 turns. Trust me, and that's, I think, the problem with Jarvan. Like, he's so reliant somewhat on your opponent, just continually playing, like, he seems reliant on the fact that your opponent will be playing the exact kind of same game plan. Like, he seems like he'd be insane in mirrors and not much else, which is kind of a problem. And I've always thought that, it was weird that Lyssandra's Ice Shard that she created costs 0, but Jarvan's Cataclysm costs 3. I don't understand this at all. Jarvan's a 6-mana champion that I'm leveling up here. I know he can level up, without being on the board or whatever, but still, this is a 6-mana champion. Like, give him something, give him some help. And I think that that's what I'd do. I'd personally just make this free. Only the, obviously not Cataclysm the card, but just, the one that Jarvan creates, just make it free. Just make it free for Jarvan so that, you can continue to put on pressure with other things that you're doing, rather than having to, use, quite a significant bit of mana on, doing something that literally could just get countered, as soon as the unit that you pick dies. Like, it doesn't happen. So yeah, that's what I'd do. I'd make this free so that essentially you can use it without being punished for it at all. I think that would, help people think about, okay, leveled up Jarvan is going to be a threat pretty much, because even if you kill my unit, well, I've spent no mana doing it, so it doesn't really matter. You've essentially just probably wasted a lot of your mana telling me exactly what you're going to do, which is good for me. So that's what I do for Jarvan. I think that I don't want to go too far because they did just give him a pretty significant buff, so I don't want to like change too much and go like crazy with Jarvan, because then I'd worry that Jarvan would just become like this oppressive beast that you couldn't get rid of, that people would hate. So yeah, that's what I do for Jarvan. I think that that would help. I'm pretty sure it would help. And I think that overall, that would be a nice change of pace. And so those were the 3 champions today. We have one more coming tomorrow, of champions that don't even have a 50% win rate deck, any deck that is above a 50% win rate. And then, as I mentioned, we will go into the cards that need to be nerfed, and then it should be Tuesday and the patch notes should come out, and then we can hopefully rejoice at the patch notes rather than despair at them. I am a bit worried, to be honest, but hopefully things will turn out good. And so yeah, I will see you tomorrow with another Legends of Runeterra video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a really nice day.